My name is Cameron Whitmore, 38 years old, and the moment my brother's attorney told me I'd been written out of our father's will was the same moment I pulled out a handwritten letter dated 72 hours before Dad's death that proved my brother Blake had been systematically stealing from him for 3 years. Blake sat there in his $5,000 suit, smirking across the mahogany conference table, already planning how to spend the $18 million inheritance while his lawyer talked about Dad's final wishes. What neither of them knew was that Dad had called me at 2 a.m. 3 days before he died, told me exactly what Blake had done, and dictated a new will that left my brother with nothing but a prison sentence. When someone steals from a dying man and thinks they'll get away with it, do you expose them immediately, or do you let them celebrate first? Let me take you back to June 14th, 3 months earlier, when everything started to unravel. Dad was 79 years old, living alone in the family house in Greenwich, Connecticut, the same colonial he and Mom had bought in 1982 when his architecture firm took off. Mom died in 2019, and Dad had been declining since then. Not dementia, not Alzheimer's, just the slow fade of a man who'd lost his reason to stay sharp. He'd retired from Whitmore and Associates in 2020, selling his shares to his partners for $22 million. Combined with his investments, real estate holdings, and Mom's life insurance, he was worth about $18 million when he started getting sick. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in March, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe 8 if he was lucky. He made it 5. I lived in Boston, working as a civil engineer for a firm that designed bridges and highway systems. Married, 2 kids, mortgage, the whole middle-class American dream. I visited Dad every weekend, brought the kids, made sure he had groceries and medications, sat with him while he watched old westerns and told stories about building his firm from nothing. Blake lived in Manhattan, working in private equity, which seemed to mean taking wealthy people's money, moving it around, and taking a cut. He was 42, divorced twice, no kids, living in a Tribeca loft that cost more per month than most people make in a year. He visited Dad maybe once a month, always asking about finances, always concerned about protecting Dad's assets, and making sure everything was properly structured. In May, Dad started having trouble with his bank accounts. He'd call me confused, saying his statements didn't match what he thought he had. I had $340,000 in my checking account last month, he told me one Sunday afternoon. Now it shows $180,000. I don't understand where it went. Did you make any large purchases? I asked. No, just the usual bills. Something's wrong. I drove down that same day, sat with him at his kitchen table and went through his statements. What I found made my blood run cold. Transfers. Dozens of them. $25,000 here. $50,000 there. $75,000 to an account I didn't recognize. Dad, did you authorize these transfers? He squinted at the screen, confused. I don't even know how to transfer money online. Blake set up the online banking for me last year. He said it would be easier. Blake, of course. I called him immediately. Blake, Dad's seeing some unusual transfers from his accounts. Do you know anything about that? Long pause. He probably just forgot. You know how he is. These are major transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Cameron, I'm managing Dad's finances. It's complicated. Tax strategies, estate planning, investment rebalancing. Don't worry about it. I want to see documentation. You're not on his accounts. It's none of your business. He's my father. And he trusts me to handle his money. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. He hung up. I did take it up with Dad. Did you ask Blake to manage your finances? He said he could help, make sure everything was protected. I signed some papers he brought over. What papers? Power of attorney, I think. He said it was just so he could help pay bills if I got too sick. Power of attorney. Blake had gotten Dad to sign over legal control of his finances. I spent the next week digging, called Dad's bank, identified myself, explained the situation. The account manager, a woman named Patricia Torres, was sympathetic, but limited in what she could tell me. "Sir, your brother has legal power of attorney. The transfers are all technically authorized. Unless your father claims fraud or revokes the POA, there's nothing we can do." "What if Dad doesn't understand what's happening?" "Then you'd need a court order declaring him incompetent and appointing a new guardian. That's a legal process that takes months." Dad didn't have months. I hired a forensic accountant, a guy named Marcus Webb who specialized in elder financial abuse. Cost me $15,000 I couldn't really afford. He worked fast. Within 2 weeks, he'd traced every transfer. The money wasn't going to investment accounts or tax-advantaged trusts like Blake claimed. It was going to shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada. Those companies had one principal, Blake Whitmore. He was transferring Dad's money to himself, laundering it through corporate structures to make it look legitimate. Total theft over 3 years, $2.4 million. "This is textbook elder financial abuse," Marcus said, showing me his report. "He used his power of attorney to systematically drain your father's accounts. It's criminal fraud, possibly felony theft depending on Connecticut statutes." "What do I do?" "You need to tell your father. Then you need to report it to the police and petition the court to revoke Blake's power of attorney." I told Dad on a Tuesday evening in late July. We were sitting on his back porch, watching fireflies, drinking iced tea. I showed him Marcus's report, walked him through every transfer, every shell company, every stolen dollar. Dad didn't say anything for a long time, just sat there, holding the papers with trembling hands. Finally, "Blake did this?" "Yes." "He stole from me?" "Yes." "While I'm dying?" "Yes." Dad folded the papers carefully and set them on the table. "I need to make a phone call." He called his attorney, Gerald Hoffman, a man who'd handled the family's legal work for 30 years. They spoke for 20 minutes. When Dad hung up, his face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Gerald is coming tomorrow morning at 9. We're going to fix this." Gerald arrived with a paralegal and a notary. They spent 3 hours with Dad, going over documents, taking statements, drafting papers. When they left, Dad looked exhausted, but satisfied. "What did you do?" I asked. "I revoked Blake's power of attorney, filed a police report for fraud, and I changed my will." "Changed it how?" "You'll see when the time comes." Dad deteriorated rapidly after that. The cancer was aggressive, the pain management barely working. He moved to hospice care in early August. Blake showed up once, tried to talk to Dad alone. Dad refused to see him. Blake left furious, threatening to sue everyone involved for alienating him from his father. On August 19th at 2:17 a.m., my phone rang. Dad's number. "Cameron?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Dad? What's wrong?" "I need you to come, now. Bring a witness. Bring your phone to record. This is important." I grabbed my wife Jennifer, drove to hospice at 80 miles an hour, got there at 3 a.m. Dad was propped up in bed, oxygen tube in his nose, eyes clear and focused. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to record it. Video. Make sure you can see my face, see that I'm coherent." I pulled out my phone, started recording. "Dad, this is Cameron Whitmore. Today is August 19th, 3:04 a.m. I'm here with my wife Jennifer. You asked us to come. Tell me what you need to say." Dad looked directly at the camera. "My name is Thomas Whitmore. I'm 79 years old. I'm dying of pancreatic cancer, but I'm of sound mind. I want to state clearly that my son Blake Whitmore stole $2.4 million from me over the past 3 years using power of attorney he obtained through deception. I have evidence. I've filed police reports. I've changed my will." He paused, catching his breath. "Gerald Hoffman has my new will, dated 3 days ago. It leaves everything to my son Cameron except for $1 to Blake. I'm leaving Blake a single dollar so he can't claim he was accidentally omitted. Cameron gets everything because he took care of me, loved me, and didn't steal from me while I was dying. Blake gets what he deserves. He looked at me, not the camera. Cameron? In my desk at the house, bottom right drawer, there's a sealed envelope addressed to you. Gerald has a copy. Inside is a letter I wrote explaining everything. Give it to Blake when the time comes. Make sure he understands. Dad, promise me. I promise. Good boy. He smiled weakly. Now go home. Get some sleep. This is going to get ugly. He died 18 hours later. The funeral was tense. Blake showed up with his girlfriend, a woman named Tiffany, who wore sunglasses inside the church and spent the whole service texting. Blake barely looked at me, barely spoke. At the reception afterward, he cornered me in the hallway. I'm contesting the will, he said flatly. What will? Whatever he did at the end. He wasn't thinking clearly. The medication, the pain, he was incompetent. Any changes he made are invalid. He was perfectly competent. We'll let a judge decide that. 1 week after the funeral, Gerald Hoffman's office called requesting my presence for the reading of the will. Blake and his attorney would be there. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday, September 12th at 10 a.m. I arrived 15 minutes early. Gerald's office was in downtown Greenwich, old money law firm with wood paneling and leather chairs. Blake was already there with his attorney, Dennis Cartwright, a guy who specialized in contested estates. Blake looked confident, relaxed, like he'd already won. Gerald opened the meeting formally. We're here for the reading of the last will and testament of Thomas Robert Whitmore, dated August 16th. August 16th? Dennis interrupted. We have a will dated June 3rd. That's the valid will. The June 3rd will was superseded, Gerald said calmly. Mr. Whitmore executed a new will on August 16th, 3 days before he entered hospice care. That will is valid, properly witnessed and notarized. Blake leaned back, smirking. The August 16th will is invalid. Dad was on heavy medication. He wasn't competent to make legal decisions. He was competent, I said quietly. You would say that, Blake shot back. You were manipulating him, turning him against me, probably forging documents. Blake, Dennis put a hand on his arm. Let me handle this. He turned to Gerald. We are prepared to challenge any will dated after June 1st on grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. Mr. Whitmore was terminally ill, medicated, and susceptible to manipulation by family members who stood to gain financially. Gerald folded his hands. I was present when Mr. Whitmore executed the August 16th will. He was lucid, coherent, and adamant about his wishes. I can testify to his mental capacity. Your testimony is biased, Dennis said. You've represented the family for years. You have loyalty to Cameron. Actually, I said, reaching into my bag, we have better evidence than Gerald's testimony. I pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Blake and Dennis stared at it. What's that? Dennis asked. A letter from Dad, dated August 19th, the day he died. Also a video recording from that same day. Both show him explaining exactly why he changed his will. Dennis picked up the envelope cautiously. Inside was Dad's letter. 3 pages, handwritten, signed, dated. His handwriting was shaky but legible. Dennis read it silently, his face going from confident to concerned to pale. This is, he started. Evidence of fraud, I finished. The letter details how Blake used power of attorney to steal $2.4 million from Dad's accounts over 3 years. It names specific transfers, dates, amounts. It also references the police report Dad filed and the forensic accounting report that documents everything. Blake lunged forward. That's a lie. I was managing his investments. Into your own shell companies? I pulled out my phone, queued up the video. This is Dad on August 19th at 3 a.m., 18 hours before he died. He asked me to come record a statement. I played the video. The room filled with Dad's voice, weak but clear, explaining everything. Blake's theft, the will change, his final wishes. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Dennis closed the folder. Blake, we need to talk. Privately. No, Blake said. This is fake. Cameron made this up. Dad would never… Blake, Dennis said more firmly. We need to talk. Now. They stepped into the hallway. Gerald and I could hear raised voices through the door. Dennis saying criminal liability and fraud charges, and you didn't tell me. Blake saying I can explain, and it's not what it looks like. They came back 10 minutes later. Blake's face was ashen. Dennis looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. We're withdrawing our challenge, Dennis said stiffly. The August 16th will stand. Gerald nodded. Very well. Let me summarize. The estate of Thomas Whitmore, valued at approximately $15.6 million after the recovery of stolen funds, is to be distributed as follows. To Blake Whitmore, the sum of $1. To Cameron Whitmore, the remainder of the estate, including the family home, all financial accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property. Blake stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You destroyed this family, Cameron. You turned Dad against me when he was dying. You're going to regret this. No, I said quietly. You destroyed this family when you stole from Dad. I just made sure he knew the truth before he died. Blake stormed out. Dennis followed, apologizing to Gerald about wasting everyone's time. When they were gone, Gerald poured 2 glasses of bourbon from a decanter on his desk. Your father was a good man. I'm sorry it came to this. Did the police follow up on the fraud report? They did. There's an active investigation. With your father's letter, the forensic accounting, and the documented transfers, the DA's office is building a case. Blake will likely be charged within 60 days. Good. I drove home with Dad's letter on the passenger seat. That night, I sat in my study and read it one more time. Cameron, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't see what Blake was doing sooner. I trusted him because he was my son, and that made me blind. You were the one who stayed, who cared, who loved me without wanting anything except to spend time together. You get everything because you earned it through loyalty and love. Blake gets nothing because he earned nothing. He took. That's all he ever did. I love you, son. Take care of your family. Live well. And don't waste energy hating your brother. He has to live with what he did. That's punishment enough. Dad. Blake was indicted in October. 8 counts of elder financial abuse, wire fraud, and theft. He took a plea deal, 3 years in federal prison, full restitution of the $2.4 million, which had already been recovered and returned to the estate, and permanent relinquishment of any claim to Dad's estate. He's currently at FCI Otisville in New York. I've never visited, never called, never written. I sold the Greenwich house for $3.2 million, kept Dad's architecture awards and his wedding ring, donated his clothes, set up college funds for my kids, paid off our mortgage, invested the rest, and I framed Dad's letter. It hangs in my study now, next to a photo of him and me from my wedding day, both of us grinning like idiots. Blake's attorney said Dad left me nothing. He was wrong. Dad left me everything that mattered, his trust, his love, and proof that he knew who his real son was. Sometimes inheritance isn't about money. It's about knowing that when it mattered most, you were the one who showed up. Blake got $1 and a prison sentence. I got everything else. And that letter, that 3-page handwritten letter dated 72 hours before Dad died, was worth more than all the money in the world.